Hey now, and how are you doing? Want to welcome you to the next episode of Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. Man, today we're going to be bringing it hard. We're going to be telling some stories. We're going to maybe have some dad jokes, but we're definitely going to talk about really the ways that we actually have to show up as humans, as fathers, and we're going to get some inspiration from my friend TJ. How you doing today, TJ?
I'm doing great, brother. Thanks for having me on, Dave. Looking forward to this awesome discussion.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. I get the energy part. Well, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, so I'm recently retired. I'm almost in my first year of retirement, so I'm pretty excited. So I'm a freshman retiree. I am a trophy husband for my wife who won't divorce me, but she will take away my trophy husband status if I don't keep it up. So that's what I keep doing there. Um, Spent 32 years in the Army, really enjoyed that. And I am a girl dad of a single daughter, not a single daughter, but one child, and it is my daughter who's overseas right now, summer abroad. And I am a best-selling author. I just had my book come out about 2 weeks ago, and it's been good. I've been really enjoying it, and I'm in the process of writing a couple other projects with my brother, with the Trophy Husband Survival Guide. I have an identical twin brother, looks just like this, unfortunately.
And at least that's what your wife says, right?
Right? Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah. You're welcome. But no, but not only are you a warrior dad, so I always want to make sure that I want to let you announce that. But thank you so much for your service. That's
Thank you.
it really is something that I'm in awe. I was born on an Air Force base, but I've never served. So thank
Right
you.
on. Which Air Force Base?
Lackland. Is there any other one?
Oh,
No. Yeah, my dad was down in Texas at the end of his
nice.
career, and I was almost born in Mexico, actually. They were going to go on a little trip from San Antonio, from Lackland to Mexico. My mother's like, "I'm not really feeling good," and they knew I was coming, and they didn't. And a couple hours later, I went to, I was like, "Get me out of here," and we got out. And then
That's awesome.
6 weeks later, my dad got out of the Air Force and came back to New York to raise us
Nice.
and things like that.
Nice.
Yeah. So you have so many stories. I don't even know where to start because let's talk about your book, man.
Okay.
The warrior dad stories. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot there.
Yeah, I get a lot of questions on why warrior dad, and the very simple answer is I'm a warrior and a dad. So it's very easy to make that title. And these are stories or really poems that I wrote for my daughter about my time deployed. I've been gone quite a bit, well over 20 deployments worldwide with 9 of them in actual combat. And so during those years, I really did say much about my military service. Wanted to kind of protect my daughter a lot about that. And she was living with her mom at the time. I'm a divorced and remarried now. And as I was preparing to retire, I look back on all these haikus and poems I wrote for my daughter during my last deployment, and I just started to put them together into a story. And some of them have in a children's book that I'm getting ready to publish here at some point later this year. And then some I put together for Warrior Dad. And a good buddy of mine, he's on the front cover. My buddy Dave says, "Hey man, you can tell a pretty good story." And he's been there through a lot of my stories and experiences. And so he helped me shape the story arc from when a dad is leaving, when his daughter's 6 years old, a very specific time in my life. And there's a reason for that. And then going through all his deployments, and he comes home when she's 20, and then how do I tell that story in those intervening years to tell my daughter, even though you're growing, although I was afar or I was away abroad doing all these other things, I never forgot about you, like at all. So how do I tell that story? Well, I like poetry, so I just do it that way.
That's awesome. I'm a father of two girl dads, so I know
Yes.
some of the pain. My girls, my youngest just turned 21, and my oldest is 23. So wasn't sure I was getting through those teenage years, but but
That's
we
my
somehow get
daughter's
through it.
20. That was tough. Oh yeah, my daughter's 20. That was tough. I was like, okay, here we go. Here we go.
Yeah, it's funny. Just speaking as a dad, there's times that you don't, but then there's times that, man, I got to tell you, they call out and you're like, wow, okay, this made it all worth it,
Yeah.
or close to all worth it. But I love it, and I get to embarrass them as much as possible, which is
Oh
always a
yeah,
good
that's our
thing. Also,
job.
yeah.
That's our job. That's what we do.
So the haikus, the stories. I love the
Mhm.
art. There's so many different ways of storytelling, and that's what I want to also talk about. Is it's not
Okay.
just, hey, this is what happened on a day. Let's weave the stories in a lot of different ways. So, had you been writing all through all of your deployments, or just like when you saw that you wanted to move transition into being a trophy husband?
So I've been writing all my life. I actually, right next to me here, I've got a thing called Panther Tales. When I was in the eighth grade, my brother and I were publishing that. I thought it was, I found it. My mom actually had it, so she's like, "Oh, you want this?" Like, I actually do want that. I think that's pretty awesome. So I've been writing all my life, but as a soldier and as a senior leader in the army, it's like, and some of the things I've done, like, do I tell people I'm a poet? Probably not. I
Right, right.
don't know how that was going to go, so I never told anybody. But my daughter got me this really neat stuffed animal, a little beanie baby bear called, and we eventually called him Cool Bear. For my
Mm.
last deployment, it's like, hey, Dad, please take him with you. I was like, heck yeah, I'm doing it. And so this dude went everywhere with me. I was a brigade sergeant major at the time, and I traveled all over Afghanistan, seeing our soldiers, ensuring they had all the resources they need, talking to other folks, setting the tone and setting the, paving the way for our guys to do what they needed, guys and gals know what they need to do. And so I just started writing these little short haikus, and I would send them to my daughter because it was easy to do when I got back to my room. And then we took a bunch of pictures with Cool Bear, and then so I would just sit there with all of them when I had a few minutes of my time, and I would just write some quick little haikus, some poems and stuff. And then one of the coolest ones is a buddy of mine's an F-16 pilot, so Cool Bear, oh yeah, so Cool Bear got it. I said, hey buddy, hey brother, can you get up there and bring Cool Bear up there? And can you fly a flag for my daughter? I'm trying to get all my this flag flown on all these different places I travel. And I send so I can send this collection of certificates to my daughter. He's like, heck yeah. So Cool Bear goes up one night and he comes back down, meet up with my buddy on the flight line. He's like, hey man, Cool Bear's a warrior. He was on a couple sorties with me. He was on a couple gun runs. He's a badass bear. And I was like, perfect, love it. That's my man. And and that story made it into my children's book. I thought it was good. Obviously a little bit watered down, but yeah. So and then I just kept writing from there. Actually, the majority of it's really the writing my last deployment because I had a lot more time. In my ninth combat deployment, uh, I I didn't do operation because obviously at that point that wasn't my job to do that. My first aid, I was so busy there was no really much there was no time to write. It was just operation after operation after operation, in the time that I was overseas. But that last year, my last full year in Afghanistan, I had way more time. That's where I started doing a lot of my writing for my daughter, and then it was good. I enjoyed it, and it helped me through my some of the challenges I was facing too. So I used writing to help me for through my healing process. It was
Well,
great.
100%. That's where I've done a lot of work with veterans on, that we're really good about training our veterans, and I'm not knocking it, but the when you leave, they're less good about, getting you prepared for those next stages. That's the one thing that's been common and been lucky enough.
Mhm.
I've learned some horse therapy. Like I've got into all these different places, and writing I do find as one of those ways to only heal myself. And again, like I said, I wasn't a veteran, but I've gone through some life stuff. But I also had my peace bear that when I was going around in my corporate career, I'd be going around the country
Awesome.
and went as far as Guam to train people how to identify counterfeit medicine. But I bought peace bear, and we'd have pictures of all that, and people would laugh. And but after
Wow.
a while, yeah, when you mentioned that, I was like, oh man, yeah. Because I've been putting together those old pictures, and I'll never forget. I was hiking up in Yosemite, and this old
Mhm.
couple came over. I'm like taking like a selfie of the picture, and they're like, "Can we take a picture with it?" I go, "Sure. Give me your address." They're like, "No, no, no. We just want a picture with it," and then they walked away. And
That's awesome.
I was like, yeah. So I tell them the story, and I've given them names. I wrote a story about them, and because writing really does help us so much. What does writing do for you?
So I actually just spoke on an author summit last week at the end of May, and my topic was how writing saved my life, and it did.
Mm.
So I had some pretty dark times in my career, and then there was a point in my life where I didn't think I had too many options left. I was actually at had a pistol with two loaded magazines sitting on my bed for a number of days and weeks until I finally had the courage to call my buddy and say, "Hey, man, um, you like match shooting? I've got a," and he does it for stock pistols. I say, "Hey, I've got a stock pistol. You want to come use that one?" He's like, "Heck yeah, I'll be right over." He knew what was going on. Without saying a word, he was there and grabbed it. And then the writing, once I started on my path, because my daughter was that's why I have her at 6 years old in 2012. And she stood in front of me, her dad, just this really big dude, and said, "Hey, you're too scary. I don't want to be here. I want to go home back to mom." And it dropped me to my knees. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize like how, even though my wife had told me, some of my friends had told me, when you hear that from your daughter of 6 years old, it barely comes up to your knee, maybe mid thigh, and has the courage to stand there in front of our dad, who's 230 some odd pounds, who's just a soldier, and said, "You're too scary." I was like, holy, I got to fix this quick. And it wasn't quick. It took years. It was years in the making, coming off the wagon, back on the wagon, and everything else. And then, like I said, in 2017, I really started writing about Cool Bear. And then I got home and I was looking at some old photos from my past deployments. I said, well, would it be kind of cool if Cool Bear was watching me do all these things in my memories? So I started writing about that. And then I was starting to come to terms with some of the things that I had done and seen. Uh, and so that was helping me out. And I was going through traumatic brain injury issues. And so I spent 10 weeks in a traumatic brain injury on site or inpatient down in Tampa, which was great. And they had a lot of different therapies. Art was one of them. And I just
Hmm.
continued to write that way. And really, just, like, I have all these different writings, and a lot of them will come out eventually as a children's book. And then Warrior Dad was the one I wanted to get out first because I really wanted to focus that time on our veterans. So when I talk about writing saved my life, it gave me a new lease on life, literally and figuratively. And a buddy of mine gave me a new lease on life too. That was a literal thing. Saved my life years ago, and now I'm able to. I'm much more comfortable because I am writing about it. And as I write, and now I've got this book that's out, Warrior Dad. This is my life story for my daughter, written for her, from me to her. And now the world sees it. But the great thing is you don't have to serve in the military or any civil service like for firemen, for policemen, all these other things. You just have to be a good human being. You want to connect with your family. Hey, read stories like your stories, my stories, someone's story. Connect these stories that of inspiration, hope. You could tell it. You could tell it. Hey, I went through this crucible and I came out the other end as a better human being, not as I was before, but what as I am today, and move into my future tomorrows. And that's how writing has really saved my life, and then put me on a path to. For me, for my goal is to help others. Is if I can get my voice out there more and more to inspire someone else to walk their path, a reforged journey to make themselves a better person. It's not going to be easy. And some of these paths are very, very difficult. Having walked several of them, I know I'm not the only one. But if I can
Yeah.
encourage someone and be their like champion, even if it's just my voice, I'm in. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, well, very similar. I mean, to me, it's inspiring because very similar. I attempted suicide, and going into that dark place. So I understand when people talk about it, and I also have found writing, when I get into my dark periods, I would write. And then it had nothing to do
Yeah.
with the dark period. I would write, what my book Redemption, is about horse riding and things like that. And people wrote it, and they didn't know what I was going through at that point, and it was fine. Even my first book was also about my person. Was to all of my girls to kind of tell them who I am, uh, you know, and you have to know when your heart when the title of the book and the philosophy for me is when your heart says it's your time to soar. You have to know when you want to get up off the ground and choose it. And I had some stories in there, and you do want to hear it. You want to know that you're not alone. That's the most important part is we're not alone, and that's where storytelling does become so powerful. And in a lot of ways, and I'll ask you the question, by telling your story and the darkness that you might have faced, by telling those stories, the darkness gets a little lighter.
It does because you're sharing a burden. And I heard this from a friend of mine a long time ago. The reason I keep telling my story is because now there's a shared experience and potentially a shared burden that's helping me, folks supporting me, and then when I hear their stories, I'm taking on just a little bit of their burden, so I can support them as well through their lives. And so you're right, it does, and it makes it more comfortable talking about some of those tough experiences, and then someone coming up to you later on, a few days later. I got when I was in my last job right before I left the army, I was overseas and with my wife because she was stationed there because we in Korea, and so I was out there visiting with our teammates. And Joanne and I, my wife, we're in a leadership panel, just the two of us, answering a bunch of questions, and someone asked like, "Hey, how, we talk about mental health and everything else. So let me tell you a story." So I did. I told him this a different story, and I said, "But and the reason I tell these stories is because one, it's a reminder for me that I still have to stay on this path because the journey never ends. We just sometimes it gets easier, but it doesn't end because we still want to strengthen ourselves, right?" And
Yeah,
so
that's the
I got a
crazy part of
letter in the
life.
mail. Yeah, and I got a letter in the mail from this guy. He's from overseas. He sent it to my house. He's like, "Hey, thank you. Like, I am now on my path to recovery. I want to say your words inspired me." And I showed my wife that. She's like, "Hey, you keep that because that's a reminder for you too. Because you tell people this. You got to keep doing it." I said, "You know what? That's right. That's why I do that because the more you talk about it, the more you realize, hey, it's not just the story for others. These stories are a reminder that we still have to walk our own path."
Yeah, that's the trick of life is there's no
Mhm.
end. The end is when they put you in a box. Other than that, you can make those changes. You can do anything that you want to do, and I also think about, like a letter like that. That's a great story. There's a saying, that they mentioned in Schindler's List and other places, in that, if you save one person, you save the world. And, you know, you never know who's going to hear that. When I did my TEDx talk, people were like, "Oh, that's not it's it's not great." You look at the online warriors, right? The keyboard warriors. Yeah, they're all, there's very little that they ever say that are positive. But the story that I love to tell is not about those people, and sometimes how I felt bad about those people. The stories that I want to tell is always about the 8 families that reached out to me when I talked about my suicide attempt, and people who thought were thinking about it, and I was able to guide them through what I was going through and get them into professional help, which I'm not. And then there were families who had already lost people to it, and they were like, "Well, they want to just talk to somebody who had gone through that darkness." And I said, "This is why I did it." I go, "I can't tell you for your family, but I think that's where I always go. It also, rather than holding on to our stories so tight in that it's, I don't want anybody to know. I don't give anybody the power to tell my story. You can tell a version of my story or your version of what I did during those times, but you can't tell my story. My story is my story. Your story is your story. And that's the
I
part
love
of the
that.
resilience. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. I have an identical twin brother, and I've known him since day zero when the cells split. Bam, there we are. I've known him for literally all my life, right? And a lot of people say, "Oh, you think the same, do the same, act the same." I said, "Well, maybe at certain times, but my brother and I have shared a lot of experiences over our lives, going through the exact same things at the exact same time, and come out with vastly different
Cool.
perspectives." And we can tell the same story from different. Oh yeah, we've got a great one. In fact, it's one of the chapters that we're going to put in our book, a twin perspective, a leadership twin perspective. And he thought it was hilarious what they did. I was like, dude, not so funny. But again, it's interesting about telling stories is the reason why stories are so compelling. One, they've been around well before the written word. And two, if you could tell a really good story and not just tell a good story, but how do you learn from that story? How do we learn from that story? And how can you pass that message along and then build a legacy of like unstoppable people? Unstoppable, if there's good people, of great character, trying to make just a better life for themselves and realistically, a lot of them for our children and our families. Like if we can do that, like you said, if I can talk, just get one person to walk a path of getting themselves reforged from where they were yesterday to where they're going tomorrow and the future tomorrows, then I say we've done a great service to humanity because it's just an opportunity. People have given us so much in our lives. What's going to hurt to give back? I think it's great.
Yeah, to me, it's the butterfly effect. Is it's not only talking to TJ, but then TJ is going to talk to the story and how it grows differently. And where you have with your brother, it is incredible how you could have sitting in the same room, same parents, and all that, how you still have different perspectives. And that doesn't mean you might have the same values most of the time,
Oh yeah,
but but the perspective is going to be completely different, right? Mom liked me best, things like that. But that's where we have those conversations. Yeah, we know
no,
mom liked you best.
oh no, well, oh no. So we got the thing one and thing two shirts that she got for both of us. She's like, "You're thing one because you're the first one out." I was like, "I'll take it." And for my brother, it's kind of neat because he's getting ready to retire from the army as well. So we're gonna, and once he is out, we will kind of do our road show with the two of us. Just it's kind of neat to be able to answer questions from two different perspectives from two very senior leaders in the military. Then eventually, we'll both be retired. So it's going to be kind of neat telling some childhood stories and then stories of our time in service and some of the difficulties that we faced and that we helped others out. I mean, we've got some very interesting stories, and like you said, a lot of people they'll they'll crush some souls like in the bad way, and it's very few and far between when you hear stories of hope and motivation, inspiration, where although it happens more often than we think it does, especially when my time in the service. I mean, there are men and women leaders who are just sacrificing so much of their time and energy for other people. And it's incredible the amount of energy goes into other people. We just don't talk about it because it's not the sexy part of the job because it's grinding and it's very just I mean it's a drain. It is an energy drain and it's very difficult sometimes to get your own energy back after days or maybe weeks on trying to really help out your organization and your team. So that's, as I tell people, live life to its fullest. You do have to be selfish, and that is refresh your own well, because at some point, if you run out of energy, it's not good for anybody.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's part of the stories that we tell because everybody doesn't know, right? If you haven't served, and now there's more people who have served. But for a while growing up, right, there wasn't a lot of people that were serving, right? The forces were shrinking, and you didn't know, and you're like, all right, those people that versus now, which I'm glad that veterans are given the due because I had two grandfathers. And my dad was a veteran, but my grandfathers went into World War II, and they came home differently, and different times, different things. But where I'm going with this is the fact that we don't realize freedom. For somebody who hasn't served like myself, I realize it because I make sure I'm around veterans and I take care of veterans in every way that I can, but a lot of people just think it's something somebody does. It's like, the guy who flips burgers and how
Hmm.
it's not because I also lost a cousin in Afghanistan. And that's why I always think about those days and knowing the difference between Veterans Day and Memorial Day are huge lessons that we learn. Now, while you've had a career, uh, how do you blend, or do you plan on blending some of that leadership experience into your storytelling?
Yeah. So with the book, that's one of the kind of my gateway into what I would like to do is speaking engagements. I talk quite a bit about my Reforged journey. So I'm going to be building a course about that. So, that's the one thing I'm in the process of doing right now is I'm redesigning my site, my website and everything is what does Reforged look like? I know what it looks like and how do I get that out to folks? And then and as my brother comes on board with Warrior Dad Stories, cultivating leadership is going to be part of his shtick, so to speak, as he gets finished with his Maxwell coaching
Yep.
certification, John Maxwell coaching certification. And then together we'll be speaking quite a bit. So we do talk a lot about leadership. We do talk about our four pillars, our four guiding principles. We both have four. I think two or three of them are the same. He's got a couple others that are different from mine, and that's great. because again, it goes into we are two different people, although we look a lot alike. And we talk about that all the time. We'll go out, we'll introduce ourselves to people as we go on these different leadership panels. We talk just for a little bit. We say, hey, here's my four life principles. My brother will say, here are my four life principles. And all the questions that you'll have that we'll receive, our answers will be guided by those four life principles. And that's what's been guiding us for all of our lives. And we started to codify it a lot more because it makes it easier when we do have these discussions on leadership and from our most senior leaders to our most junior, it's got to be able to get that message out to them, and that's what we're going to be doing next. So we're planning for that. It'll be hitting the road next year on that as he gets ready to off gas out of the Army this year, and we're making the structure and foundation right now. So for right now, it's going to be a lot of writings that are coming out and some leadership lessons that I have on. Like I have life's leadership lessons on LinkedIn, which I had paused as I was getting ready to do this book launch, which was over Memorial Day weekend. So now I'm getting back into that, and I've got one I want to post this morning about my bike ride. So I'm looking forward to that. And then when my brother gets out, again, we're gonna we'll do something on some of these on LinkedIn, but it'll be a specific, you know, twin perspective message, and we're going to build that as well. So that's what we've got going on with our 5 year roadmap, and that's what we're building out here over the next few months.
Yeah, well, that sounds so exciting. I mean, it really is, blending, those principles. So could you just share what your principles are?
Yeah. Smile, the world smiles with you is definitely number one. And I can go to each one of these as we go by, but let me get the four of them out. So smile, the world smiles with you. Be disciplined in thought, word, and deed. And everything begins with a thought. What can we do today to make the team better tomorrow? And there's our video match our audio. Be fit, mind, body, and spirit.
Mhm.
And then have fun. Live life to its fullest. Life is meant to be lived and experienced, even through our darkest times, like you and I have already spoken about. It is meant to be experienced. It is meant to get, not to get through, but to enjoy and to learn. So those are my four guiding principles.
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly, really important to keep continuing learning and the transitions in life. And that's really, I guess that's the purpose is how do you find those purposes, like your transition? So you knew you were retiring and your brother is planning on it. So how did you plan for some of those transitions, or how do people plan for transitions?
Yeah. So the military, I would say from the Army's perspective, we do have a good system that the transition assistance program, Soldier for Life program. It's good. It can be redundant at times, and you're sitting in classes, and it's made for the masses. But as a senior leader, I went through an executive course, which was really nice, very tailored for senior leaders. So that was kind of nice. But I knew I was going to retire. I mean, I hit 20 years. I could retire at any time. And it really started. I just loved what I did. So I got to 30 years. I said, okay, my body's starting to fail. I'm probably, I think it's a young man's game. It's time to get out of the military. So I did my 2 year submission. Here we go. So now it's time to plan. And there's a lot, right? You got to chip away because I traveled quite a bit during those last few years in the Army. You chip away for it, but as I tell people, have a 5 year plan, regardless of if you're going to stay in your current career, if you have an idea what you want to do, because with that 5 year roadmap, you can make the adjustments as you need, or as you're getting ready to, that's my dog. He's super excited. Hey, bub. And then with that roadmap, and you can make any adjustment you want, but it's a continuous planning cycle. So for me, I knew that I did not want a traditional 9 to 5 coming out of the Army. After 32 years, that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to
Yeah.
go work back for the government as a government civilian or a contractor. That's not what I wanted to do at all. So I said, okay, what do I want to do? Well, I want to be a trophy husband. That's what I would do. I'm going to help my wife out. She's still in the military. She's getting ready she's crushing it right now. So what am I do? I'm gonna help her out because she does travel quite a bit. So that's one of the things. And then writing started. I was like, man, this is really cool. I really like it. So I spent the last maybe 18 months, 2 years. I was like, to finish out my time in the military is just how do I get these books out, these projects, and then what is it that I want to do? So I reached out to some the chambers of commerce in the varying areas. I've got a note with the Chamber of Commerce next week. I'm looking forward to that. But you have to have a plan, and you also have to understand that when you leave an organization as big as the military. We'll just go with that one, right? Because that's all I've known since I was 17. When you leave, you've had all these titles.
Mm.
And in my last job, people were opening doors, and it was actually kind of weird. I'm used to opening my own door. I'm used to doing all these things by myself. I get to my last job, I couldn't do anything by myself. It kind of is very overwhelming, somewhat frustrating for a guy who likes to do stuff by himself or for himself. But now I got out, and now just I'm TJ Baird. I'm not Command Sergeant Major Baird. I am TJ Baird. That's why I ask people, hey, what should we put on your nameplate? Hey, TJ Baird. That's what you put. That's who I am. I just went to a buddy's retirement ceremony. Oh, sorry, change of responsibility. It was amazing. And I sat in the
In the back end.
yeah, in the cheap seats. It's great. Right. When I'm there with my wife, I sit next to my wife because I'm her husband. She's got her place where she's gonna sit based on protocol and everything else. I walk in there, there's no nameplate, there's none of that stuff, whatever it is. I just go find a seat and I sit down. And I actually kind of find it's actually more fun
Mhm.
because I can move around a little bit more. I can chit chat with someone next to me if I want to without having everybody all eyes on you. And so you have to remember when you come out of these organizations or whatever you're moving on through life, it's cool that we had these titles, that we had these extrinsic values that we are tied to, but it's not who we are. It's not our self-worth. It's not who we are internally, intrinsically. And if you don't know that coming out, it is very difficult, no matter if you have a transition plan or not. 'Cause I know a lot of men and women out there who are just struggling, especially in the military, coming up because they've lost their identity, because they've tied it to an external value and have forgotten what it means to be you, the individual, like me, TJ Baird, you, Dave. This is who we are based on our values, our character, whatever it is. It's not about the titles. Drop those anchors as fast as you can. You want to run to another title, that's fantastic. You want another, that's great. But what drives us internally when it comes to that's why I talk about be fit, mind, body, and spirit. The spiritual part of it is passion, purpose, everything else. Internal, what drives us every day. And so that's how I was able to transition out of the military quickly, not quickly, I'm sorry, in a pretty positive manner. And I didn't skip a beat. I knew what I wanted to do, and because I had spoken about this for years on end about just the internal who you are and tie your self-worth to you, it was very, very helpful for me.
Yeah, well, that's what really is important that you knew internally at that point you had grown enough to do that, and you know the part of the legacy that you built is the the integrity that you had throughout your career, and while all the titles that you had, and but you still just wanted to be you when you got out. But what is legacy, right? Again, you're still involved in the military life because your wife, your brother, and your daughter's just traveling, right? She's not serving.
She's in college right now, so she's a
Okay.
rising senior, so she's her study abroad with Shakespeare, so she is loving it.
Yeah. Wow. Traveling abroad, the Shakespeare, I can't imagine not loving
Oh yeah.
it. I
Yeah,
want to do that
plays, a lot of
now.
plays. A
Yeah.
lot of they're in Venice right now, so a lot of plays going on.
Oh,
So it's actually, oh
beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah, Venice is one
loving
of
it.
my favorite cities. Uh, but so all that you brought in, but you're still building onto the legacy,
Yeah.
not only the integrity of who you are, right? Even writing the book to your child, to your daughter, it was part of like an explanation, not
Mhm.
necessarily, but to the legacy to make a piece, or at least to explain your side of that story, and to make sure that she knew that they love you. I just, I've done similar things for my girls, and they
That's
get it
awesome.
or they don't get it, and um, but the legacy, what does it mean to you to build a legacy that lasts?
I love it, right? So one of my things is live my four life principles to leave a legacy of unstoppable leaders. And I still have men and women that reach out to me. I've got a small group that we've mentored. My wife and I have mentored over the years. They call us mom and dad. They're much younger than we are, still in the military, and they still reach out. They call. And then we're in their area. We go and visit. We sit down with them, and it's been a lot of fun. So things like that. We still do that with others. I'm getting ready in the end of August. My neighbor reached out. I'll be speaking to a group of young airmen here about their impacts around the world. And I've seen this a lot with our men and women who are the support to the actual operation. They think, oh, my what I do doesn't matter. So actually, it does. It actually matters more than what you think it is, and I tell them a story, and I've told these same stories over and over again to everybody. And like I said, my last show was very similar. When I went to our one of our sports centers, and I went in there, and it's a huge wall of data on connections for the internet, for data, and everything else like that. I said, "Oh my gosh, this is a mission center, but it's completely different than what I'm used to as a tactical strategic operations guy on the ground. You are looking at data flowing through, make sure everything is working properly, so that the frontline analysts can do their job. Because if it wasn't for you, nobody would do their job." And so that's what the discussion I'm going to have with these young airmen at the end of August. And I talk about young airmen, these are officers enlisted as well, as because you are not out there on the sexy end of the job. No one can do that job if a plane can't take off, if logistics aren't moving, if whatever it is, all the things that we need for this operation to occur, if it's not resource effectively, nothing is going to happen. So you
Right.
actually have a greater impact than what you think you do, because without that, this less than one, the last 1% will never happen. And that's just 1%. Everybody sees it, and that's all the hoorah stuff and everything else. But everybody forgets that 99% that goes into it. They haven't been on that 99% as well as a staff guy and
Right.
supporting others as they're forward. It's a lot of work. But without
100.
it, that 1% doesn't work.
Yep,
Yeah.
100%. You're right. I've always
Yep.
been in most of my jobs over my career. I've been the guy in the background, right? I'm not a lawyer. I was in the legal field, but guess what? If I didn't get my documents prepared for the attorneys and things like that, it's all the guys behind the scenes. It's not the guys always out front, doing some of the, like you said, the sexy jobs. So with your leadership, because obviously logistics. I mean, even the story, when you talked about logistics, uh, you know, Alexander the Great really, that was one of his specialties was, he gets all the credit, right? They don't have Alexander the next the Great, but it was all about logistics. What he did is he
Yes.
always brought enough food to savage, to get the city, and that's what he did. He starved them out. That's why, among the early learnings throughout your life. Actually, before I ask you a question, because you mentioned airmen, and my dad again was an airman. Um, were you in are you in Lackland in San Antonio?
No, so I'm in Offutt Air Force Base right now. So I am here on we live on post. My wife has an assigned house. We My wife is the Strategic Command Senior Enlisted Leader. And so I am just, following her around. I love it. I
Okay.
am this is actually the first time we actually moved together when we were married.
All right. Well,
It's crazy.
we grab our successes where they are, but
Yes.
logistics and all of that stuff. Obviously, that was your career. How would you apply to some of those lessons in everyday life for the rest of us?
Yeah, so I'll give it I will go back if you I could go back kind of by my past. I can talk about what I do now. So for my past, it is because I was forward quite a bit, and having the men and women there that with the information we needed, the resource and all the again, right, in the logistics, right? So we talk about logistics, which is always a great quote in the military. Amateurs plan tactics, professionals plan logistics.
Mm,
And when you look at Germany's failure in Russia, it was a logistics issue. When you look at Napoleon,
uh,
some of his failures
right.
were logistics issues. When you look at a lot of different failures from larger militaries, it's because the logistics either failed or was interdicted, and then they couldn't resupply their forward staging militaries and armies. So that's a challenge. And then so now in my life is I am not on the forward tactical end. I'm not on the forward operational end or anything else like that. So now what I do is just like you are, right? So today we talk about you and I are we're not really so much in the background as in our voices are getting out. And folks may say, hey, your voices are just voices, and you may be you're in the background. You're not, because if someone can hear our voice, especially on your platform you have here right now, is one person can take away something that's
Mhm.
positive from your guests on your show. It's awesome. But this, what we're having here, this is just the 1%. But people don't see is all the work that goes involved that's involved for you to
Right.
for you to set the podcast up, get your as your hosting, get the guests on and all the information and what it does to set up your room and everything. So that's a lot that has to happen before this 1% that we're doing right now. And so what I tell people is uh, thank those men and women. Just say thank
100%.
you. Like in my last job, I said, I walked around I learned a lot about my organization because there was so much going on in the background that people didn't realize. Like you go into our gate, there are police officers there. I say, hey, those police officers there is frontline defense, and if you look at all the things that are going around there and how they defend this facility, it's pretty impressive. And so there's all these different tiers that we can come in and not have to worry about safety and then lighting and then food and everything else. Like all these things allow us to do the job that we are all getting paid to do and the mission that we're all going towards. And as you know, the great quote from the NASA janitor, when they asked me, "Hey, what are you doing?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm putting a man on the moon. That's what I'm doing." And so, if you can get your organization to do that, you're winning. You are winning as a leader. And so, you've got to bring the whole team on board with it. It's not just the forward-facing element that people need to really see. And it happens quite a bit, right? Because again, that's potentially may make you money that way. But never forget to thank the men and women who who support us, who lift us up to get onto these platforms,
Yeah.
to get our voices heard, because at the end of the day, it's their voice as well. And sometimes we share their stories because they are the same as ours, because we lived a lot of the same experiences. So that is what I talk about. The support side of the house is, hey, how do we get all these things out there for those forward-facing individuals or organizations or units? It is a lot of hard work. And as I've told people before, I've been in places where it was 8 hours of work per one unit of operational time. And so, yeah, so that's
Right.
that's a that's a lot
It's the
people don't realize.
preparation, right? I
Yeah,
mean, that's the thing is
yeah,
when something runs really smoothly, it's not just because you could throw bodies at it. You don't throw the right bodies at it. We're New York, we're New York Met fans, so we know if you throw the right bodies at it, it does not give you success or even the right amount of money. You have to do
yeah.
it the correct way, and utilize your resources in the right way.
No, exactly. I love me some Dire Strawberry, but good Lord, I know my drill sergeant looked like him when he came off the bus. I was like, oh my God, this is where Daryl Strawberry went to. This is going to be a rough day.
Yeah, but it doesn't get any better when when you see that the talent and
Yeah,
applying the talent. Now
yeah,
I know we're getting close to the end of the episode, and I always have everybody walk into a magic garden, and just to plant the seed, and the seed is of knowledge. What's one piece of you, and you've given us tons of information during this episode. What's one
yeah,
last piece of advice that you or seed that you'd like to give us today?
yeah. Tell your story. Connect your story with others, because especially as leaders, everybody thinks everything is honky dory and life is great and paved with gold and everything else. No, our lives are just like everybody else's. We have our challenges, we have our failures, we have our successes. And if we tell the right stories and show that, yes, that we erred along the way, but someone supported us and helped us up and moved us along our path, that's fantastic. So tell our stories. Don't be afraid to tell your story, because when you don't, then you start creating unwillingly, you create a rift between we think you do this when I actually did this.
Right.
And so have fun and tell a story. Tell one that's memorable and tell one that has a good lesson learned. And unfortunately, a lot of those lessons learned happens during our failures. But you know what? As my wife says on or my wife's tattoo says, fall seven, rise eight. That's what we got to do.
Always got to get up, man, and I'm
Oh
really
yeah,
glad that
brother.
you've gotten up and you're you're still soaring. In my brand language, I always say it's your time to soar. So I hope you're going to continue soaring and we'll connect further. But how can our people connect with you, right? If they want to, or pick up the book, we'll put in the show notes the links to the book. But how can they
Yeah.
kind of connect with you?
Yeah. So they go to warriordadstories.com right there.
Mhm.
Just hit the .com at the end of it. And there's a bunch of stuff on there. So there's a direct link to Amazon for the book, or you just get on Amazon and type in Warrior Dad. On my website, you can download the free companion guide that goes with the book. It talks about all the backstory on why I wrote it and on some of the poems on there. It has the lost haikus that really inspired a lot of the odes that are on there. And then on the Creative Forge, come take a look at some of my work there. I've got an award-winning poem. It is about my reforged journey from where I was when my daughter was 6 years old and told me, "Hey, Dad, you're too scary," and my wife telling me, "I love you, but we can't live like this forever. We got to make changes." To going to the polytrauma center down in Tampa, and then coming out of that and walking my reforged journey, and I'm still talking with my teammates and staying connected with them. And so again, hit me up on warriordadstories.com. You can contact me through there as well. I do answer all of my emails, and hit me up on my LinkedIn and social media that's also on my site. And I'd love to hear your stories. And I know a lot of people are have some trepidation about sharing their stories, but hey, let's collaborate it. If you're worried about if you're like, I don't know if I want to share my experience, hey, I'll put it into a poem for you. And if
Right.
it's just to you, that's perfect. If you want to share it with the world, let me know. We could do that as well. So I'm all on board with that. So, and Dave, thanks a lot. I really appreciate this time I've had with you. This has been really, really awesome. And thanks for letting my dog chime in a little bit too.
Yeah, we didn't hear the dog, but I'm glad that he felt comfortable enough to chime
Okay,
in. We'll give him a co-credit. But no, but thank
perfect.
you so much for your time, for your service, throughout your life, and your time today to help us talk about storytelling. It's one of the most valuable and healthiest things to do. And I know we tease about it, the dad jokes, those things, but we need to find the ways to get into having the freedom to be able to tell our stories and the power that our stories have.
Yes, sir. Thanks, brother.
Okay, thanks. And for everybody else, as always, want to wish you peace and love in your life as your foundation. And when it's time to bring a bat, that too is okay. But remember, it's about bringing awesome thoughts like we did today. And thank you so much, and God bless.